Hello, if you've been before, welcome back. If not, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. I'm thinking of this as sort of like a companion piece to my ongoing series, Fear Entity Explorations. Recently, the Rusty Quill Company celebrated 10 years of the Magnus archives with a live stream that I could not watch because I was at work. That's unfortunate. However, I heard, people talk about it after the fact. Within the live stream, it was announced that the Magnus Protocol Season 2, Act 3 will return in July, which is great. I will not be the first to be a little disappointed that it's taking a little bit to get the next act of the second season out, knowing that there will also be another hiatus after Season 2 ends, leading into Season 3. But that's neither here nor there. Also, I really like the lights from the blinds shining on my face. They will disappear as the sun goes down, but I kind of like that effect that it has. Other newsworthy news that they revealed in the live stream was the announcement of a book from the library of Jurgen Leitner by Primi Mohammed with Jonathan Sims. I don't know much about publishing, not sure what the with implies, but I would assume that he is, if not a co-author, very much has some creative control here. It is an official Magnusverse novel releasing on October 27th, which is a day before my birthday, so that's a birthday present for myself. The cover is this beautiful green and black, on theme with the show, with what I believe depicts Icarus falling, a Greek folk story warning about lofty ambitions. Very relevant. This is the description of the book. In the winding, perilous halls of Jurgen Leitner's library, you never know what you'll find. A starving cookbook, an ancient scroll that casts cool, predatory breezes, a cloth-bound hardback that compels you to dig, 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 dig. Free, these books are more than simply unnerving, they're deadly. But the library keeps their dangers in check and their would-be readers safe, also Leitner claims. For two of his employees, the risks are worth it. For Hugh Franklin, research assistant, the library is a place to belong, where his skill in translating is valued, even if his employer is a bit odd. For Sebastian Everett, acquisition specialist, the library is an opportunity to indulge arcane ambitions, even if it means pretending to care about the mission. Though their tenures at the library were years apart, Hugh and Sebastian's stories unfold in parallel, and their footsteps echo down the same eerie aisles, caught in a web spun long before either ever heard the name Jurgen Leitner. Will they find a way out, or will the library consume them before it's too late? With the announcement of this book, which I have already pre-ordered, I wanted to dive into Jurgen Leitner like I have been doing with my Fear Entity Exploration videos. First, I will look at Leitner's appearances early in the show, and then in 80 the Librarian, where Jurgen gives John his statement, and then any appearances or references after that. Hopefully, this new book will fill in holes that we didn't know we needed.
If the shop clerk who put it out had been paying any attention, it would have been in the glass case where they kept those things people donated that were actually valuable. I had a flick through, but it seemed to be entirely written in Latin, so I didn't have much luck discerning what it was about. The only English seemed to be a bookplate at the front that read, "From the Library of Jurgen Leitner," although no author was listed.
Jurgen Leitner himself doesn't appear that commonly in the show, but his books do. In the Magnus archives, there are these various books powered by the Dread powers to varying levels of danger. As we'll soon touch on, Leitner collected these books and placed bookplates inside them that read "From the Library of Jurgen Leitner." His name will become synonymous with these books, to the point that some of them without the bookplate will still be called a Leitner. A Leitner or two first appears in 4 Page Turner, when Dominic Swain buys the book Ex Altiora. He attempted to translate it, saying it meant "from higher" or "out of the heights," and my own Google Translate comes up with "from higher places." You get the idea. When he reads it, he finds a Leitner bookplate and woodcut illustrations, each showing a mountain or cliff, or in one picture what appeared to be an empty night sky. I felt an odd sensation when I looked at that image though, simple as it was. I was about to fall into it, and my stomach gave an odd jolt, almost causing me to drop the book in the middle of Oxfam. Once he owns it, he constantly smells ozone, which is a common smell used to show that there's going to be an electrical storm, lightning in, fiction and stuff. You smell the ozone, there's going to be a storm. It's also used in the show for specific reasons. As Swain reads more of it, the illustrations have a small effect on him, feeling vertigo and unnerved at the strange proportions. While doing research, he found Leitner's name in an eBay listing for a book called The Key of Solomon, bought by a deactivated user, GR Bookworm 1818. We'll be back to this. He does find some history about Leitner. Leitner had been a big name in the literary scene during the 1990s, some rich Scandinavian recluse paying absurd amounts of money for whatever books took his fancy. He dropped from public view sometime around 95, but she recalled he used to have extensive dealings with Pinhole Books down in Morden, and gave me the details for Mary Key, who owned it. He winds up meeting Mary Key, whose head is shaved and skin is covered in tattoos of tiny script. That's a secret tool we use for later. She took XLTR from him, excited to see the Leitner label, and she showed him a different book with a matching bookplate. She says it's written in Sanskrit, and when it passes through the shadow, it releases oddly shaped bones. When he looked at XLTR again, he sees an illustration has changed, showing a branching figure called a Lichtenberg figure, which he associates with a childhood incident where a friend of his, Michael Crew, was struck by lightning, leaving harsh scars in similar patterns. Swain is almost consumed by the book, but when he gets home, Gerard Key, Mary's son that she keeps referencing, shows up and buys the book from him. He burns the book in a metal waste bucket before leaving. Swain also looked up Gerard Key and notes that Mary Key died 4 years ago with long strips of her body removed post-mortem. More clues to touch on. Ooh. Exaltiora is a Leitner connected to the Vast, which I will touch on more a bit later, but at least here it is destroyed. The Sanskrit book is connected to the flesh, the bones being warped and wrong, and the Key of Solomon also briefly comes back in the future. We will also touch on that later. I will say, at least these first 2.5 Leitners shown are pretty mild. No extreme danger is presented through Exaltiora or the Sanskrit book. Like, it's implied that something might happen with Exaltiora, but we never actually see it actually happen. We always get vertigo, that's it. However, at the end of the episode, John mentions Leitner as someone he's very familiar with. He mentions an incident in Leitner's library in 1994, which aligns with Swain's research. He says, still, all the other books from his library have been custom editions of known texts on demonology or the arcane. If there are Leitners out there that we haven't even heard of, I fear they may be the cause for some small alarm. This line also turns out to be incorrect because there are many books that are not editions of known texts of demonology or the arcane. We'll touch on this idea in a bit. John, up until now, has been adamant that anything supernatural must be faked or imagined or perfectly explained away. But here, he's all in terms of danger. Jurgen Leitner has done the world enough harm, and we must pursue all available avenues to ensure that he does no more. The next major Leitner does pose a big danger. In 17 The Bone Turner's Tale, Sebastian Adekoya discovers the titular book in his local library. It was oddly marked, and the last person who checked it out was Michael Crew. Things are being connected, yes? Then Jared Hopworth, Sebastian's childhood bully, takes the book and turns into the Bone Turner, a flesh avatar that can manipulate the body. Adekoya sees a weirdly shaped rat almost flattened near Jared's house, and later Jared's mother, her arm in a sling and moving oddly, roughly returns the stolen book to the library. At night, the book oozes blood, and when he reads it, he finds it to be a variation on the Canterbury Tales, with gruesome depictions of body horror. He also finds the Leitner label, not fully remembering the name, calling him Jurgensberg or Jurgenlight or Jurgenlicht. That's close enough. That's Leitner. Soon, Jared reclaims the book and kills Sebastian after he delivers a statement. The Bone Turner's Tale itself will recede in the background, but Jared Hopworth continues to appear, so check out my Flesh video if you're so inclined to know more about him. Then in 23 Schwarzwald, we see a possible origin point for some of these dangerous books. Albrecht von Closen, an ancestor of Mary Key, while exploring his estate in the Black Forest, finds a tomb filled with books and an eye-aligned man. There are rows of books, all rotten and unreadable, but he does take with him a well-preserved book written in Arabic, which he hoped Jonah Magnus would examine for him. Thankfully to Closen, a servant stole a coin that he'd found in the tomb, leading to the servant's painful death at the hands of that eye-aligned man. The book von Closen finds isn't mentioned any time later, and while there's not enough evidence that it's an official Leitner, that it was in Leitner's official library. I think it's safe enough to mention that it had an effect on von Closen, but that's for later. Listen, a lot of things build up to in the future, so we will return to a lot of this. These Leitners, whether owned by him or not, seem to just pop up suddenly, manifesting as copies of prominent stories or even original takes, leaving a trail of destruction behind whenever they are taken, whenever they are read. In 35 Old Passages, Harold Silvana and his renovation crew stumble upon a building designed by Robert Smirk. A young Gerard Key appears, mentioning the building's connection to Jurgen Leitner. In the early 80s, Silvana was tapped by Leitner to do a consultation. He had met Leitner, giving us, the audience, the first physical description of him. When we first met Jurgen Leitner, he looked very much like I had imagined him. Portly, middle-aged, short blonde hair in the middle of going gray, well-tailored business suit. He wanted Silvana and his crew to dig a hole in the basement, but the ownership of the building had to be contacted, which enraged Leitner. The negotiations deteriorated after that. In the uncovered passages, Silvana realizes that the hole Leitner wanted him to dig would have let them hear. Leitner was trying to access Smirk's architecture. Gerard had found the Sanskrit book in these tunnels, the same book that Mary showed Swain in Page Turner. Further in 43, section 31, when Basira gives John a handful of the supernatural cases she's had to deal with, she tells him about encountering Diego Molina. Using his role as a visiting assistant curator from the Mexican Museum, he stole a small book bound in red leather from the museum he was working. That book, probably most likely a Leitner, connected to a Sag, which is a Sumerian demon that Diego Molina worshipped in place of the Desolation. He still worshipped the Desolation anyway, so, power there. Back in 12 First Aid, we saw Gerard kill Diego and look for that Leitner, the small book bound in red leather, but he never found it, and that book is just lost to the wind. The big moment occurs in 46 Literary Heights, where Herbert Knox finds Ex Altiora in 1998, 14 years before Swain picks it up. Knox knew about Leitner, never meeting him, but knowing he disappeared in 1994 and had tried to find any Leitners back in circulation, mostly out of name recognition than actually knowing about the horrors. A book dealer friend of his, Kristen Bauman, had Ex Altiora in her possession, likely due to the dizziness and vertigo that Swain also felt when he had Ex Altiora. Bowman had died in a fall, and in her will, she had passed on the book to Knox. We get an even more in-depth description of the book's illustrations.
It told the tale of a small, unnamed town high on a cliff top that sees a monstrous creature begin to approach. The poem is unclear whether it is a beast, a demon, or a god, as it uses the words interchangeably, but it is seen far off, its head and body lost among the clouds. The majority of the story details the villagers' attempts to prepare to do battle against this creature, but each time they devise a countermeasure, the thing gets closer and is shown to be far larger than previously suspected, rendering their preparations insignificant. At last, when it is almost upon them, its impossible vastness undeniable, the villagers surrender to despair and hurl themselves from the cliff top onto the rocks far below.
I really enjoy the descriptions here. Knox also knew that Michael Crew, a student at the university he worked at, was looking for rare books, and when he saw Ex Altiora, he bought it immediately. His check bounced, and when Knox went to confront him about it, he witnessed Michael Crew use the book to trap the Lichtenberg figure and jump off a tower. This is when Michael Crew became an avatar of the vast, and Ex Altiora was lost to time until Swain picked it up years later, and then it was burned by Jared. We do get a dry spell of Leitners for a bit, but Gerard does appear again in 48 Lost in the Crowd, just to maintain his presence, as we've seen him revolve around these books, connecting him to the name of Leitner. I don't think he would have liked that, but we're still connecting him. In 49, The Butcher's Window, The Bone Turner's Tale impact continues as Jared Hopworth makes bodies disappear for the Ukrainian mafia. In 62 First Edition, we get a landmark episode. Mary Key gives Gertrude a statement of the first Leitner she found, the catalog of the trapped dead. She'd seen a doctor use it on her patients to extort them for money, and Key killed her to get the book. She does note that this occurred before Leitner was collecting them, but she did meet him. She gives a similar description as Silvana did and says he bored her, that he wasn't like what she expected. He would come to a bookstore, gaze at her books, but never buy anything, and she asked Gertrude if they ever called these books anything else before Leitner, they being the people who are in the know of the horrors. Gertrude doesn't remember, but it is an interesting thought. Mary states that the catalog is connected to the end, and answering Gertrude's questions references the Sanskrit book, saying it was a poem about dying animals. As she finished, she tells Gertrude she's close to finding the secrets of the catalog and hands Gertrude a page from it. We'll return to this page later. I had to take a quick break, and the light is fading. Yeah. Small bits of lore are filled in 66 Health and Customs as John investigates Gertrude's movements and finds her laptop. He confirms that she's GR Bookworm 1818, having bought the Key of Solomon along with 2 other books. A special printing of the 7 Lamps of Architecture by John Ruskin and a 1910 pamphlet called A Disappearance. John notes that the Key of Solomon is an almanac on demonology, which implies some sort of power, and he does fear what it does. We get 2 standalone Leitners nearly back-to-back at the tail end of Season 2. 68, The Tale of a Field Hospital, has Joseph Russo, who found the titular book by Frederick Treves. He mentions that the sticker was torn off from the inside, the Leitner bookplate removed. He reads out some of the pages, describing the continued deaths of Private Amherst to various diseases. Russo gets a paper cut from the book and dies soon after. Poor guy. Interestingly, this is the only Leitner that references a character that remains unconnected to the book. John Amherst appears multiple times throughout the show, but he's never connected to the Boer War, which is what happens in the Tale of Field Hospital, or even mentioning Leitner. And since we don't get any backstory from him, it's left completely ambiguous. It would be really cool if this Leitner was a manifestation of the corruption that also described John Amherst's backstory, like a chicken before the egg type of situation. Then in 70, Book of the Dead, another end-powered book is used. After a friend's death, Masato Murray inherits the titular, A Book of the Dead, which describes and changes his horrible manner of death every time he reads it. He tries destroying it, but continuously fails, one of the few Leitners that cannot be destroyed. In this episode, John concedes that, with no indication that this was owned by Leitner, he's not the reason these books act like this. Like John had talked about, Leitner causes these books, but this is evidence against that. Also, I guess Mary would be evidence, but this is the first time that John actually starts verbalizing this idea. This episode also has John discovering the charred remains of the Key of Solomon within the Institute's tunnels. Other connecting ties, in 75 A Long Way Down, John reads a statement depicting Michael Crew pushing someone off a tower. Exaltiora isn't mentioned here, but as we see, more suffering has occurred because of it. As we go into the finale of Season 2, the mystery of Jurgen Leitner will be answered in 80 The Librarian, into which I will dive more in depth.
And so I branded them with my seal. I told myself that if any should escape, such a mark could help me retrieve them. But I think in my heart I dreamed of my work becoming known, that the library of Jurgen Leitner would stand as a symbol of courage and protection. Hubris.
Case number 01702116-B, statement of Jurgen Leitner regarding his life and works, recorded direct from the subject, 16th February 2017. Quick summary of this episode: John has Jurgen Leitner sit in his office to explain how he dealt with Not Sasha and what he is doing in the tunnels. Leitner tells John that he started collecting the dangerous books and started a collection in an attempt to control them. He used Robert Smirk's designs to build a library to be able to contain the books, hiring assistants to help study them. Leitner had collected nearly 1,000 of these dangerous books, all of them marked with his nameplate, before his house was attacked by monsters. Most of his assistants perished, but Leitner was just barely able to escape. He sought Gertrude's assistance, who helped him reclaim some of the books. John wants to know about the powers he keeps referencing, and Leitner tells him about the existence of the entities. He needs John's help in getting Gertrude's files from Elias, who killed her, and John gets confused as there was video evidence. Leitner explains that Elias has powers from the Institute's patron, the Eye, and that John is connected to it too. John gets flustered and has to leave the smoke, leaving Leitner alone for Elias to walk in. Leitner pleads with Elias to help him stop the unknowing, and Elias kills Leitner to avoid him giving too much information for John. He leaves his dead body to be discovered by John, who flees, and later Tim and Martin finally escape Michael's corridors and also find the body, with Martin asking aloud what John did. So a peek behind the curtain, I was planning to do an entity exploration analysis bonus video with episodes not focused on a singular entity, as there are some great episodes like this that aren't trapped under one umbrella. I had planned to do 4 of these episodes, and this was one of them. But with the announcement of the new book, I decided to cover it now and leave the other 3 for that video. Can you guess which 3 episodes I would cover for that? This episode touches on most all of the fears, either tangentially or directly, and I'll point them out when they come. Leitner is finally revealed. All throughout Season 2, the mystery of who or what is in the tunnels is sprinkled here and there. Most red herrings were because of not Sasha, but personally, I don't know about you, I never expected it to be Jurgen Leitner. John had found some clues, pointed out that someone was alive down there, such as in 71 Underground with the food wrappers and trash John found, to the recording John got in 74 Fatigue of a middle-aged man leaving the trapdoor and moving the floor. But there wasn't enough evidence to show, to me at least, that a world-famous or world-infamous collector was down there. The way that John and others talked about Leitner, how he disappeared, it firmly set him as another likely dead character haunting the narrative, like Gertrude. Also, the burnt remains of the Key of Solomon felt like it happened a long time ago, so that didn't really add to the clues of what was down there. But no, Leitner is alive for now. John takes him into his office, wielding a metal pipe he had found to defend himself against not Sasha in the episode prior. 79 hide and seek. John was being chased by the not Sasha, and just as she was going to get him, the walls moved to trap her. Leitner tells John that they need to talk. John asks if not Sasha is dead, and Leitner is dubious whether it can die or not. He also confirms for John that it had killed Sasha. This foreshadows 165 Revolutions, where John kills not Sasha for good in retaliation for what it did to Sasha. When John asks about her, about what happened to Sasha, Leitner says, "Was that her name? I'm afraid she's gone," which feels dismissive. We'll get back to this. Further, Leitner explains that though he might be Germanic or Norwegian, people in past statements have commented that he was Scandinavian, Austrian, at least Eastern European, he actually grew up in England, making it his first language. In the Season 2 Q&A Part 2, Alex and Johnny talk about struggling to cast Jurgen, and after having very successfully cast Johnny's mother, Sue Sims, as Gertrude, very successfully, I might say, he had Johnny's father, Paul Sims, read some lines for Jurgen. And he was cast immediately, Alex saying that he matched Christopher Lee's voice, who famously played Count Dooku in Star Wars and Saruman in Lord of the Rings. I'm inclined to agree. Paul Sims brings a severity needed for Leitner while still making him feel small and weak. No shade to Paul, that's just what the character is. John and Leitner come to an agreement. Leitner will answer John's questions and John will help him. First, he asks how he trapped not Sasha, and Leitner pulls up a book, an unexpurgated copy of Ruskin's The Seven Lamps of Architecture, published in 1845. Of course, Ruskin didn't even begin writing the book until 1846, and the text of this one varies markedly from the version that was distributed. It gives an acute sense of the walls pressing in around you, and if consumed recklessly, will physically entomb the reader. This is a buried, aligned book. And just for me, unexpurgated means not having potentially offensive or otherwise objectionable parts removed. Unedited, basically. Very unedited. You would get buried alive. The Seven Lamps of Architecture by John Ruskin is an extended essay that described the designs that would become the Gothic Revival. As mentioned prior, a handful of Leitners are versions of real books, such as Tale of Field Hospital, Frederick Treves that I mentioned prior, and Bone Turner's Tale being derived from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. In those, there's no talk about the comparisons beyond just like what's in it textually. You know, we talk about Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and then Bone Turner, what it says in there, and then Rousseau reads out passages of the Tale of Fields Hospital and talks about how they compare and contrast. Here, it's implied that the Leitner book came into being before the actual book was written. We don't know when Canterbury versus Bone Turner or the corruption Tale of Fields Hospital to the original Tale of Fields Hospital came out. But here we get actual publication date, which is interesting. It is perhaps an extant branching of the Buried having caught onto Ruskin's thoughts, and it just became really fun implications here. Leitner used the book to reorganize the tunnels while John explored them, wanting time to figure out if he should trust John or not. He had tried to cover up his tracks, but John had a keen eye to finding the trash, which he says he should have expected, alluding to John's connection to the eye. In 41 Too Deep, when John explored the tunnels, he saw a chalk arrow leading deeper in, and here Leitner suspects that not Sasha had drawn it in an attempt to flush Jurgen out. The other book that he has is A Disappearance, connected to The Lonely, 1910. Leitner mentions that he'd assigned an assistant, Jacob Fang, to read it and was never seen again. But if you read just one or two words, he becomes briefly invisible. Both Seven Lamps and A Disappearance, as I mentioned prior, were bought by G.R. Bookworm 1818. We're connecting all the lines, all the dots. Leitner has been hiding for 20 years since the destruction of his library, but it was only recently that he's been in the tunnels, which are large enough that he could access them away from the Institute. He got into tunnels elsewhere, was able to get to the Institute. Little scurry rat. John asks if Leitner is to blame for the books, why he set up the library of Jurgen Leitner. I thought that I could control them, that I alone had the knowledge to contain them. Back then, I believed that they were simply books. Horrifying, powerful, yes, but with rules, limits that could be charted. I was a fool. I had no idea what forces lay behind them or that they had other servants that might come searching. From the onset, Jurgen Leitner's name has been elevated to this level of fear, but seeing the reality of who he is deflates all that anger and fear. It's a really interesting way to write about this man, a very, very flawed and weak man being associated with so much pain and suffering. He elevated himself into such a powerful figure and suffered because of that, and knows now that he is a fool. Added on top of his pathetic personality is his dismissive attitude. Like with Sasha before, his mention of Jacob Fang and A Disappearance felt more like a footnote to him. Yes, this book killed this person, right? About the library and his assistants, he says, I don't know how many assistants I sacrificed to learn the secrets of the volumes I collected. Dozens, at least. Only a few escaped with their life and mind intact, and even then they were deeply marked. But I was relentless. I saw myself as a guardian, a reverse Pandora, gathering the evils of the world and locking them away. Lofty ambitions. He laments about his name being associated with evil, having his name played on all the books that cause harm. He calls it hubris. He recognizes all of the harm he's done to his assistants and to the victims of his book, and he's just so pathetic. I have to mention the Jurgen Leitner rant.
Jurgen Leitner, stupid idiot motherfucking Jurgen Leitner, goddamn fool, book collecting, dust eating, rat old bastard, shithead idiot avatar of the whore. Biggest clown in the circus, laughed out of town, cowboy motherfucking Jurgen Leitner. Stop pinning me when I talk about Jurgen Leitner. I hate him so much. Why does he have so many fucked up books? Why did he decide to fuck around and find out? Just set them loose. Is he dead? Is he a bastard? Man has such a visceral effect on me, not even in the room. Never seen this man's face, and I know he has the world's shittiest beard. Get away from me. If I have to deal with Jurgen Leitner speaking one word in person, on voice, in podcast, not only will I close the tab, I will delete my bookmark out of spite, and have to rewatch the entire series again for the experience of being able to skip all the times when he is mentioned or alive. I don't even know why I hate him so much. He collects books, but I am just mad because I am angry. He better have some fucked up backstory to explain this. If he's just some rich shithead who's a fan of creepypasta and wanted the IRL version, I'll go ham. Better have had a book make him kill a man, because if he didn't, I'm gonna make him.
And can you believe that this was written before the person who made this rant had met him in this episode? From the context clues that tell me that this is just about one of the Leitners that we meet. This is before episode 80, The Librarian. This is just when the books are talked about, are seen. And also, he doesn't even have a fucked up backstory. His family was rich, working in manufacturing, which turned into a matter of extensive property holdings and carefully managed investments. Money making money, whatever that means. rich people. He had no prospects, didn't really like doing anything, and just says that the only skill he had was in shopping. Almost arrogantly, he says he had the skill to find very rare things and the ability to buy them off their owners. You know, the ones who didn't die. He met Desmond Laurel, who introduced him to his first Leitner. Laurel thought that they were magic, maybe derived from the writings of Merlin. Really interesting pull there. His copy of the Stalwart Hunter's Almanac, a Hunter Leitner, mauled him, and Leitner acquired the book. And again, he's being very dismissive of Laurel's death. Leitner's pragmatism feels different than Gertrude's because at least with Gertrude, it felt like a response to the horrors, a way to survive. Gertrude's very ruthless, very uncaring. But with Leitner, it feels like numbers in a ledger he keeps. He barely describes what happens to his first assistant, Albert Strauss, only saying that he lasted for 2 weeks. Maybe we'll learn more about him in the coming book. Beginning his collection, Leitner acts very sure of himself, acting very cavalier with the danger. To begin with, I never gave much thought to their origins. I simply concerned myself with acquiring them and making sure I had staff I could spare to study them. It was easier than I expected, and I'm always surprised nobody attempted such a thing before me. He'd created his library based on designs by Robert Smirk, knowing him to have worked on trying to understand these powers, trying to contain them, have balance with the powers. At the peak of his library, he had 978 books. Nearly 1,000 books, almost all of them dangerous, under one roof. This man is insane. Then he started getting visitors, which he found odd because he didn't tell anyone about his plans. First, he got agents of the Stranger wanting to see the collection, which he turned away. With all the danger of his books, he never expected or thought that other people or beings would be drawn to those same powers, to those same books. He thought that he was the center of the world of horror, but is gravely mistaken. Like a satellite. All of a sudden, a contingent of avatars and monsters attack the library. He notes that he was cataloging a journal of the plague year, a corruption lighter. We'll return to that in a bit. Everything was screaming. My assistants, the books, even me. He begins listing the events of the attack, going assistant by assistant. I would not be surprised if we met some, if not all, of these people before their horrible demise. Totally can see the book wanting us to like these assistants, knowing where they're going to end up. Thomas McMahon was stabbed through the throat by something with too many teeth and limbs like knives. Likely a hunt avatar, not anything we've seen in the greater story, but teeth and limbs like knives tells me it kills stuff a lot. Could be slaughter, but the teeth add that monstrous predatory sense, so I'm going to say hunt for this. Mary Johnson was pulled into a cavernous maw that opened beneath her. Obviously the buried, and implies either an avatar that can open up caves at will or a moving cave that eats people. Both are fun thoughts. Gregory Todd ran into a door that shouldn't have been there. We see here that Distortion seems to have a stake in this attack, this being before it didn't become Michael. It would never be Michael, but is not Michael, is it? It is not Michael? A great hand reached down through the roof and plucked away Leandra Toulouse. An interesting manifestation of the vast. Did it break through the roof? Did it pass right through the roof? Where's the roof here? Where is it taking her? And then he also mentions an assistant whose name he doesn't remember, getting pulled into a pulsating pile of meat, some flesh-based monster, or just the flesh itself, who knows? The fact that he doesn't remember this man being killed by the flesh is infuriating, and maybe we'll also learn who that is in the book. Jurgen says he doesn't know how he escaped. Part luck, part knowing how his labyrinthian library was designed, part avoiding rooms taken over. He mentions rooms taken by the dark and the desolation, and since then, he's been in hiding. This is all we get about Leitner and his library. Almost all of his assistants being killed in the attack. 2 are conspicuously absent from the list. The main characters of the book, Hugh Franklin and Sebastian Everett. Ooh, we'll see how they factor in Leitner's story in the future. From here on out in this episode, it's mostly plot stuff, so you can skip ahead to more Leitner lore in the next section. If you so desire, I'll have chapters in the description. After giving his statement, John calls Leitner a fool, asking why he didn't burn the books, and Leitner says fire wouldn't have solved the problem, as most of the books wouldn't even have been touched, and some likely would have liked getting set on fire. And those that did, I now believe, would have been released to take a different form. Interesting wording, as we haven't seen a Leitner become something bad like that, but I can totally see it happening. Fits in with the world. Leitner says he sought out Gertrude's help 6 years ago when she had already lost her assistants. He mentioned she had 3, but we'll learn in 167 Curiosity that Gertrude had multiple. She inherited Fiona Law after Angus Stacey was killed, and she brought in Eric Delano and Emma Harvey. After Emma led Fiona into the coffin, Gertrude brought in Michael Shelley, and after Mary Key killed Eric, Gertrude hired Sarah Carpenter. Leitner may be thinking of the trio of Emma, Michael, and Sarah, not totally sure. He also briefly mentions that the Key of Solomon, finally getting more insights about the Key of Solomon, was a rare Leitner that contained elements of different powers, but trying to understand it caused issues, so they had to destroy it, him and Gertrude. John questions this information about the book having elements of different powers into learning about them, and Jurgen tells him this.
There are entities in this world, beings of vast, dark power. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say they are next to the world rather than in it. Their true existence couldn't function in the universe we live in, at least not as it is now. They have nothing in their pure state that could be present in the physical world, so they sit in
Different dimensions.
No, I don't think so. If there are such things, then these beings are linked inexorably to ours. They're not within our world, but they can affect it in certain ways, reaching out with their will to change things. I don't know where they come from, or how they came to exist, but they are, from what I can determine, effectively eternal.
He tries to explain to John that they are not gods, as humans created pantheons to explain the natural world, beings with human motives and actions. No, these beings are not human at all. Leitner uses an analogy of an ant being attacked by 3 different parts of a human, but not being able to conceive of it as one whole being. He also theorizes that these books are these beings in a purer form, while monsters and humans are, as John puts it, a muscle spasming in reflex. We will eventually learn from all the avatars and monsters John will encounter that it is all fear, and that they just want to make people afraid. A gut reaction, a spasming. John mentions Michael Distortion, and Leitner names the Spiral, saying an assistant named Domingo, who gets no other mention elsewhere. So, okay, Domingo, called it Es Mentiras. It is lies. John correctly connects it to fractals, and then asks about bones, probably thinking about the Sanskrit Leitner that he's heard about before. Leitner responds in a very important line that I feel some people tend to forget about. You're thinking too literally, examining the physical categorizations but ignoring the meaning of the thing. What are the bones? In the distortion, your Michael, the structure of a skeleton, an established reality in your mind, is twisted and warped into an impossible form. But in other cases, are they a symbol of slaughter and butchery? Are they the familiar made wrong? Are they simply part of the messy physicality of flesh? The spiral, the slaughter, stranger, the flesh. A bone can be anything. I've seen people ask themselves, if I fear blank, what entity would it be? And most of the time, the answers tend towards the aesthetic. But what does it mean to you? Fear is personal. John begins to get overwhelmed, as I would too, and defaults to simple, more grounded questions. In the beginning of the season, John had stated that despite all the supernatural events and monsters and the like, Gertrude still died in a mundane matter. She was shot. So the danger to John is very human. He asks if Leitner killed Gertrude, with Leitner deflecting, trying to not waste any more time, and he tells John he believes Elias killed Gertrude. He thinks Elias found out that he and Gertrude were planning to destroy the archives and needs John's help in finding Gertrude's files. Elias may have stolen them. But John is still processing. In 60, the Observer Effect, the employees in this institute have an intervention with John, who's been increasingly paranoid, even going as far as stalking some of them. To calm John down and show that none of them could have killed Gertrude, Elias gives him copies of CCTV cameras that CCTV cameras is the correct term, whatever, that provide alibis for everyone. Now, he returns to this evidence, saying that the tapes didn't show Elias at the Institute. I can hear Leitner roll his eyes at John. Simple mechanical eyes in his place of power. You think he can control everything they see? Elias, the eye avatar that he is, doctored the cameras. John asks if the Institute belongs to one of these powers, and Leitner doesn't give him an easy answer. John names the eye, and Leitner also gives it the name Beholding. He also says John belongs to it too. John gets extremely overwhelmed, needing to step out to smoke, having picked up this habit because of the web lighter. In his absence, Leitner talks to the heir to Gertrude, saying she wouldn't have liked him, that he's too paranoid, and that he may not be able to handle it all. We hear another click in the recording, which I'm not too sure what it means. Usually we hear the tape recording clicking to begin and end. So like, and then another one to start the recording. But this one, there's just one click. And then it just continues as normal. As Elias steps in soon after, I'm inclined to believe that it's Elias's power or the web itself turning off the recording so John doesn't hear this part. Not totally sure. John never really references having heard the next parts, so we're not sure. I'm not sure. Elias says John doesn't take the same precautions that Gertrude does, so he knew Jurgen was here and was wanting to know who it was in the tunnels. Leitner pleads for Elias to help with dealing with the unknowing, which Natasha had briefly mentioned, and Gertrude had everything she'd learned about in those files. Elias says he will deal with the unknowing on his own and doesn't need Leitner's help. Leitner asks what John will think when he returns, and Elias alludes that he planned for John to travel anyway. Leitner warns that John might die, and Elias accepts the risk. And then Elias brutal pipe murders Leitner. The meme of brutal pipe murder is because of the transcript, which does say extended sounds of brutal pipe murder. And I know on Tumblr, February 16th is brutal pipe murder day as well, as this is the episode that's when he was brutal pipe murdered, and people celebrate that. Elias leaves Leitner's body to be discovered by John. Really cool moment of the blood dripping on the floor as it sort of lingers on this for a long time, an uncomfortably long time. But it's perfect to help deliver the brutality of the pipe murder. When John finds the body, he flees, and the tape finally ends. In a different recording, Tim and Martin realize that they are back in the Institute when the tape worked. In the previous episode, they had both tried confronting John before he did anything crazy, but Michael Distortion appeared and sent them into his corridors. He didn't want them interfering, and they'd been stuck in there for days. All the excitement of Natasha and Leitner done, Michael probably let them out. Tim tries to ignore what happened to them, and Martin wants to talk about it. Tim concedes and does ask if Martin saw any signs of the woman, someone trapped in the tunnels, very likely Helen Richardson from 47 New Door, when she became trapped in Michael's corridors. They bicker about whether they should have tried to help her, but focus on confronting John. Martin walks into his office, finding Leitner's body, and he's sad John may have killed this man, but Tim is just fed up, saying he told Martin that John would be doing something bad, and the episode ends here. Leitner's story builds up with these books that pop up in statements to cause harm, some of them making lasting impacts like Exile Tiara and the Bone Turner's Tale. All throughout, Leitner's name was a mark of evil. By having put a face, or at least a voice, to the name, we see that Leitner is like any other flawed character in this world. But he does get John one step closer into understanding the things he's had to deal with, the supernatural dangers he's been facing and will face in the future. Now he has a framework to understand the unknowable. Leitner and his library will drop in importance in the plot as we go, but his name and his books will continue to appear and wreak havoc.
Elias, it doesn't have to be like...
Okay, I changed the lighting so it wasn't so, like, purple, because I feel like it was making me really pink. So we're in this light now. Now, having learned who Leitner is, these books take on a different feel. We know now that they are connected to the entities, and once we get the entities named, we can understand them even further. And some of Leitner's past will still be uncovered, not as large as before, but still filling in some gaps, especially towards the end of Gertrude's life. We begin Season 3 with a great episode, 81, A Guest for Mr. Spider, where John details how he became interested in academia. He encountered a Leitner as a young child. I dive into this episode in depth in my web entity analysis, so check that out if you want a more thorough breakdown. John witnessed a childhood bully get taken by this web Leitner, thus marking him. And this episode springboards John into investigating these forces further, both in his academic career and then in the story itself, the plot. The next Leitner we get is in the enigmatic episode 88, Dig. There's not much to say about this book. Enrique Macmillan trawls the beach with a metal detector and finds a worn book. There was a label at the very front, but the ink had run and I had no idea what it might have said. A good sign that this was a Leitner, and this is a very popular Leitner in the fandom as well. It's even referenced in the synopsis of the coming book. Enrique ended up attacking staff at the Institute when he gave a statement and died in jail of asphyxiation, choking, go figure. And the buried book is trapped in artifact storage in the Institute. Real quick, we return to the Bone Turner in 90 Bodybuilder as Jared, or Jay, sets up a gym to help him recruit others to the flesh. Just nothing really big happens in this episode. In 91, A Coming Storm, we get the statement of Mike Crew, who has been connected to Excelsior, as I've mentioned prior. After being struck by lightning and being chased by a spiral monster, the Lichtenberg figure, he sought out Leitners to escape from it. First, he found the Journal of a Plague Year, which is the same one Leitner said he was cataloging before the attack on his library. It failed to help Mike, only resulting in getting his parents killed, but he was able to move on, very dismissively. Then he found the Bone Turner's Tale before Sebastian Adekoya and Jared Hopworth did, but he found that the mark of the Lichtenberg figure stayed on any bones that he warped. He also mentions finding a different book, a small gray book written in Cyrillic, that he says just appeared on his bookshelves and tried to read him back. What does that mean? I don't know. That sounds eye-based, in my opinion. He does discard that one and finally ends up finding Ex Altiora. This leads up to, Literary Heights, and the Liquid figure become an avatar, etc. Mike isn't the first person we see become an avatar because of a Leitner, but he is one of the few that actively sought them out. In contrast to Leitner himself, Mike knew what he was getting into, which is why he's not seen in the same light as Jurgen. Daisy soon finds John and kills Mike, ending that plot thread. From here on, XLTR does not appear, because it's already been burned, so that's the end of that book. Fun moment next. I didn't catch this, I saw it when I was doing my research. In 92, Nothing Beside Remains, Elias gives a rundown of what's to come to John and the staff. He confesses to killing Leitner, which makes Martin exclaim because of his infamy. Basira says the name sounds familiar, and Daisy reminds her of the Youssef case, an introduction to higher anatomy. Basira says, "And you, Elias, killed him? Are we sure we shouldn't be giving him a medal?" This implies some gory, horrible flesh stuff, but beyond that, I have no idea what this book does. Maybe it'll pop in the future. Maybe. There's so many things that might pop up in the book. We'll see. 110 Creature feature has Dexter Banks finding a Leitner unnamed, but he says it became adapted into an old movie, Kumoga Tabeturi, which he was obsessed with. This book turned him into a web avatar and ended up kidnapping a bunch of actors. What happened to them? Anyways, the statement giver, Alexa Crawley, says she found the book that he was talking about and burned it. If I ever track down the man who used to own it, I might burn him too, implying the Leitner nameplate. Someone else beat her to the punch. Then, in 111 Family Business, Mary's catalog of the Trapped Dead returns as Julia Montauk and Trevor Herbert let John borrow it, they have possession of it, to speak to Gerard Key. Jerry gives John more information about the entities, and he talks about his mother's obsession with Leitner. She thought he'd managed what she always dreamed of, using these entities without being bound to them. I think she saw him as some kind of sorcerer. She would seek Leitners out, but would always return to the catalog of the Trapped Dead, the one Jerry is in currently. She would even send him to find more books, calling back to his appearance in the Smirk Tunnels, and Jerry began to hate the name as John did. Jerry mentions knowing that Mary killed his father, doesn't name him, used him to practice for bookbinding, suggesting he's in the book as well, but he's never found him. He thinks she may have failed in learning how to bookbind, at least with the father, but we'll soon see that she didn't. Mary tried attempting a ritual to bind herself to the book, to control it, and when she tried to get Jerry to help her, he only fled. Later, he'd be arrested and charged for her supposed murder, but the book disappeared from evidence, leading him to be exonerated. The half-completed ritual worked somewhat, and Mary haunted Jerry after her death. The half-finished ritual had left her damaged. She was powerful, but erratic. Of course, she blamed me for her new state, said if I had helped her, she would have been completely beyond death. But as she wasn't going anywhere. For 5 years, she made him look for more Leitners, but he would go behind her back and destroy them when she was weak, such as Excelsiora. Then, Gertrude found him, saving him from his mother by burning her page. Jerry started working with Gertrude, looking for evidence of rituals to stop, creating the path that John would eventually follow around the world in Season 3. Gertrude had learned from Mary how to do the ritual for the book, and when Jerry died of mundane cancer, she trapped him here as well. Jerry asked John to burn his page, and despite being afraid of what Julie and Trevor would do, John agrees. We see him burn it in 117 Testament, finally setting Jerry free. After this, the next information about Leitner specifically we get comes in 115 Taking Stock, when John reads a statement left by Michaela Salesa regarding a flesh artifact, a meat grinder that created arms. Cool. In the statement, Salesa says he was one of Leitner's assistants, but left when he saw another assistant, Warren, get literally eaten by a book. Like, it left his leg. It's probably flesh, or maybe Hunt. Also, Warren, never mentioned again. As he was quitting, he did copy Leitner's client list, which helped him start his antiquity trading exploits. Salesa and all of those objects. He would pointedly refuse buying books, learning his lesson from Leitner. Stepping back a bit, in 114 Crack Foundation, as Tim agrees to pool resources with John about the unknowing, Tim tells him that the circus grave robbed 2 graves, Gertrude and a man named George Icarus. Without the important gorilla skin necessary for the unknowing ritual, and without John's skin either, Nicola Orsinow resorted to using the skin of a different archivist, same type of dream logic, importance of power. Returning briefly to 117 Testament, John says he learned that George Icarus's grave was paid for by the Magnus Institute, meaning it was actually Jurgen Leitner's grave. We're not letting him rest. He says Leitner would be the kind of skin useful for the unknowing, similar to an archivist's skin. Still beating a dead horse, in 119 Stranger and Stranger, Nicola uses Gertrude and Jurgen's skin to mock John, taking their voices, Sue and Paul Sims both returning. Nothing really super important happens here in terms of Jurgen backstory stuff, just blaming John for Leitner's death and comparing his hubris to John's bad decisions. But they will not let this old man rest. Absolutely not. We get another Leitner in 125 Civilian Casualties, with Sergeant Terrence Simpson's statement of finding the remains of a massacre because of a slaughter at Leitner. John names it as a Leitner, but in Simpson's description, there's no mention of a book plate similar to Mary's Catalog of the Trapped Dead, so it's unknown if Leitner himself had it or it's a rare unmarked book. Simpson also mentions that the pages were all blank. The Von Closen storyline ends in 127 Remains to be Seen when John reads a letter from Dr. Jonathan Fanshawe written to Jonah Magnus regarding Von Closen's death. Receiving the doctor as a guest, Albrecht von Closen shows him his manic obsession with his collection of books and the horrifying stories written in the books. Fanshawe names one of the books, he sees the title of it, A Warning, but Albrecht doesn't read it. He just touches it briefly. Albrecht says that the books read him and tells the doctor about finding them in a tomb and getting them rebound. Thinking that this is why he has this mania, the doctor has all the books returned to the tomb. He does note that all of the books' pages are blank, and as the last book is placed, Von Closen falls dead. His autopsy reveals his body filled with eyes. Again, these aren't Leitner's by ownership, Von Closen's horror being more attached to the eye, but it's definitely more supernatural evil books like Leitner's. I had briefly thought that Schwarzwald is the origin of the Leitners, like I said, but I think that's just one place where a Leitner came from, the one that was written in Arabic. There's no mention of any book written in Arabic in this episode either, but whatever. Tying up the Bone Turner's tale is 131 Flesh, where John frees Jared from Helen's corridors in exchange for a rib or two pilled from his body for plot stuff. Jared briefly talks about reading the Bone Turner's tale, saying his learning from the book was clumsy at first, but he made it work. Jared won't return again until 171 The Gardener, where John kills him. The Bone Turner's tale left its mark on many. Another Leitner book appears in 148 Extended Surveillance, this time manifesting as a small instruction manual that Samson Stiller found that led him to become an eye avatar. Statement giver Sunil Maharaj just mentioned that someone put their name inside it. That's Leitner. Remember when Mary Key gave Gertrude a page from the catalog of the Trapped Dead? Well, in 154 Bloody Mary, we hear a recording of Gertrude reading from that very page, which contains the soul of Eric Delano, Mary's husband. The page that Jerry had looked for, his father's, was the one that Mary gave away. And we get the final conclusion of Mary's obsession with the catalog of the Trapped Dead, which is Eric telling Gertrude how he quit the Institute by blinding himself. Rounding out Season 4, in 158 Panopticon, the Leitner Seven Lamps returns as Peter Lucas reads it to free the Not Sasha in the hopes to slow down John and the staff from finding him and Martin in the tunnels. Plot stuff. Really funny moment here when he pulls out the Leitner.
That's a Leitner.
It is.
And the blood on it?
That's Leitner too.
Right.
Besides some morbid humor, this does confirm that it is the Seven Lamps, Ruskin's book, the Leitner that was there, the blood splatter from Leitner's brutal pipe murder. I wonder what happened to the disappearance. Seems to have disappeared. After the world ends and the London incursion takes everyone into their own fear domains, Season 5, in 161 Dwelling, John laments his bad actions by listening to some tapes that he's found. In one tape, Gertrude sends a message to her replacement, hopefully Sasha, telling her of the danger of the entities. At the end of that tape, Jurgen Leitner appears once more for the last time, I swear. Gertrude had summoned him to have him use the Ruskin book to move a gas main underneath the Institute, her plan on destroying the Institute after the failure of the Dark's ritual. That sets up for the climax at the end of the season. We're setting up now, first episode of the season. And that's the end of Jurgen. He's now in the tunnels. That's where he will be until he's brutal bite murdered. Later in 162, A Cozy Cabin, John continues lamenting. In a different tape, another tape, Gertrude and Jerry talk about the possible consequences of failing to stop a ritual. In it, a book is briefly mentioned, just called The Travels, likely a shortened version of an actual title, that killed a Mr. Hampton. Jerry uses Gertrude's waistband to burn it. He says that Hampton did not die peacefully. The Travels, I don't really know what that implies, what sort of entity that implies. You know, again, looking at aesthetics versus meaning, probably vast, because I believe it's like the travels of Marco Polo, maybe? Some travel book. Probably the vast. We return to 167 Curiosity, where John details Gertrude's assistance and Emma Harvey's manipulations. He mentions Emma giving Sarah Carpenter a Leitner. She took Sarah to the woods with a strange book of astronomy and suggested she go and chart the stars. The brave stargazer stayed beneath the canopy, never quite losing herself to the cosmos, though sometimes when Emma looked into her eyes, she could still see a reflection of uncanny constellations. This is such a cool, ambiguous book, connected to the vast with aesthetic details I wish the show touched on more. Sure, the Daedalus had one vast statement, but I need something more with the cosmos. What does it mean, uncanny constellations? That's really cool. And finally, the last Leitner mentioned in this show is a brief allusion in 193, A Stern Look, when John and Jonah/Elias have a weird statement moment I talk about in my eye exploration video. In it, Elias's past is quickly told, including a memory of his friend Alan Schreiber, who found an old crumbling book without the usual library markings for his academic paper that he's in college. Elias had noted that the pages are blank, as many Leitners tend to be. This eye-powered Leitner sets a monster to chase after Alan, who says it saw him through the pages and is coming to get his eyes. Elias will eventually find Alan dead with his eyes removed. The show soon ends after this. We finish with Magnus Archives and we dive into Magnus Protocol, but as of yet, there hasn't been any murderous books in the sequel. I'm missing them in Protocol, but still, what we get in Archives is good enough. We'll see what happens in Act 3 of Season 2, and then Season 3, whenever those come.
To be honest, when she was going through this stuff, that was about the time I thought I'd found Leitner, so I wasn't much in the mood to listen.
Leitner?
Yeah. Gertrude reckoned he was alive somewhere, said she thought she'd found him. I tracked him down, but it wasn't him.
You're sure?
It was just some pathetic old man. Couldn't have been him.
Final comments. Jurgen Leitner, his books, and his library are a striking and memorable part of the Magnus Archives. I feel like we've gotten a good overview of Leitner himself, but getting a book about his library and his assistants is exciting. 2 characters, like I said before, that have never been mentioned, and small holes to fill in here and there. Is the book necessary? I don't think so, but it would be a great supplemental material anyway. This is everything we know about Jurgen Leitner and his books so far, and I can't wait to learn more. If I missed something in the video, if you think that I forgot to mention something or got something wrong, please let me know in the comments below. And when I get the book, trust that I will be talking about it on this channel, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share with friends. Let me know what you think. In the comments, share with me your favorite Leitners featured in the show. Tell me about your fun ideas for a Leitner, like original content, or which in real life book could be a Leitner. For me, House of Leaves, easy candidate. Maybe Fever House by Keith Rosen, Game in Yellow, or well, at least right here. Ooh, I have it right here, right next to me, the King in Yellow. Could be a good Leitner. A Game in Yellow by Hailey Piper about the King in Yellow could also be a really good Leitner. A Leitner about a Leitner? Interesting concept, right? And again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see you later.